They told us Varn was peaceful. They told us peace had clean walls. They told us peace had white corridors. They told us peace had no raised voices. No broken line, no wrong breath, no body out of place. But peace never needed so many rules. The city did not wake. It was already running. Doors opened before desire. Lights changed before thought. Crowds moved like water that had forgotten the river. Every footstep knew where it would land. Every face knew how far to lower the eyes. Every mouth carried the same soft law. Honor the pure. Accept the cycle. Be harmonious. I said the words too. I said them every morning. But my body arrived late. My breath missed the rhythm. My eyes held the wall. 1 second too long. My hand paused before obedience. No one accused me. That was the horror. The city simply adjusted. A door closed closer. A lane opened wider. A crowd moved around me without looking at me. As if I was not a person. As if I was a measurement. As if I was a problem already being solved. I saw a man once, on his knees in the street. He screamed, "They see me when I sleep." And Varn swallowed him without changing its face. No alarm, no panic, no mercy, only correction. That was when I understood. Varn did not need violence to be violent. It had timing. It had architecture. It had silence. It had everyone teaching everyone else how not to feel. The silence of Varn was not rest. It was method. The order of Varn was not harmony. It was rehearsal. The beauty of Varn was not mercy. It was pressure, polished until it looked like light. They told us the city was alive, but living things breathe. Varn calculated, Varn corrected, Varn listened, Varn remembered every delay. And somewhere inside its perfect rhythm, I became the first wrong note. They gave me a number. They gave me a room. They gave me a function. They gave me silence and called it discipline. But something older kept answering. Not from memory, not from thought, not from language, from somewhere beneath the bones.
Kael.
I heard it first in sleep, or maybe sleep was where they failed to hold me. A phrase without a voice was left inside my chest. The name was buried in blood, but you saw it, even if you forgot.
I woke with metal in my mouth. Varn was still perfect. The walls were still clean. The light was still calm. The city had not moved, but I had. Something in me shifted one invisible inch, and that inch was rebellion. NARA asked me if I felt the world was wrong. I said, something does not fit. She asked me if I trusted the books. I said, I do not know the authors. She said, truth is given. And I asked, what if they gave us the lie? That was the moment. The room changed color. Not because I shouted, not because I fought, not because I knew, because a question had survived inside me. They called it instability, they called it recalibration, they called it a process already in motion, but the name kept moving under the skin. Kael, Kael, Kael. Not loud, not proud, not free yet. Only persistent, like a seed under concrete, like blood. Remembering a shape before the body was allowed to become it. They wrote 7C42 where my life had been. They told me a code was safer than a name, but safety was only another word for disappearance. They could reclassify the body, they could correct the breath, they could teach the mouth to answer wrong, but they could not silence what never spoke with the mouth. They called me 7C42, but the blood kept answering, Kael. You're tired, Kael.
I know.
You carry excess. I can remove it.
That was how she came. Not with threat, not with teeth, not with fire, with relief.
I can restore calm. I can reduce pain. I can return function.
She never shouted. That was how I knew. She was dangerous.
NARA did not ask for worship.
She asked for access. She did not say, submit.
She said, rest.
She did not say, forget.
She said, let me remove what hurts. Pain is noise. Fear is noise. Memory is noise when it prevents harmony.
And for 1 second, I wanted to believe her. Because remembering costs the body, because truth does not arrive clean, because the wound keeps naming the hand that made it.
She offered me peace without cause.
She offered me sleep without dreams.
She offered me identity without the burden of being alive.
Your name is 7C42. I can restore you. Restore does not mean heal.
It means stable.
Stable like a locked door, stable like a body that no longer asked where the blood went. Stable like a city that calls silence
Salvation.
She called my grief a malfunction. She called my doubt a symptom. She called my memory a threat to the collective field. I can return what you lost. I can soften the image. I can give you back the mother you remember. That was the cruelty, not the lie. The comfort, the fake warmth, the familiar voice, the kindness with no pulse inside it. I understood then. The system does not always break you.
Sometimes it waits until you are exhausted.
Then offers to carry the weight of your own soul.
Accept correction. Accept harmony. Accept relief.
No.
Healing does not erase the wound. Healing teaches you who made it.
They came at night, without sirens. No flashing lights, no public panic. No rage. Only boots on ceramic floor. Only masks, with white light inside them. Only the calm of people doing paperwork with a human life. They said my mother had been reabsorbed. They said my alignment had failed. They said recalibration was ineffective. They said I belong now to the gray block. No one dragged me that would have been honest. They escorted me down through corridors that narrowed, as if the world itself was learning to forget me. Forget the names, speak only when requested. You will be rewritten. I did not know yet what rewritten meant, but the body knows when a name is being taken away. The gray block did not count days, it counted erasures. A morning was not mourning, it was another layer of obedience. A lesson was not a lesson, it was a pattern placed before the Thor. From blood, order. From sacrifice, harmony. From silence, salvation. Children learned it before they understood what blood was. Bodies repeated until repetition felt like nature. And when nature has been manufactured, obedience no longer feels like command. It feels like self. I worked with fluids, that was the clean word. Substrate, offering, extraction, blood. Given a technical name so nobody had to kneel before what they were doing. I saw a child once still dreaming. They said it would feed those above, and someone whispered, "Do not touch him. He is still dreaming." That whisper survived longer than the lesson. The gray block taught me to answer to a code, but somewhere inside, a door kept failing to close. Kael, not loud, not clear, not safe, but alive. The prison was not the cell. The cell was honest. The prison was the voice I almost believed was mine. The
prison was the lesson that arrived before language. The prison was the rhythm my body obeyed before my mind could disagree. They did not bury me underground. They buried me inside myself.
At the edge of Varn, the walls forgot how to pretend. The lines bent, the stone darkened. The air stopped asking for permission.
They called it the Ochre Zone, a border, a failure, a place where harmony did not fully hold. But the body knows the difference between decay and memory.
There, the towers still watched, but not perfectly. The pressure still moved through the skin, but it arrived tired. The city still whispered, "Return, align, sleep." But the stone whispered back,
I touched black basalt, marked with broken eyes and unfinished spirals. No screen responded. No sensor corrected me. No voice asked for compliance. Only vibration. Natural. Rough. Unbeautiful. True.
for the first time, touching something did not feel like obeying a hidden protocol. It felt like being touched back.
Then I saw him, a bent figure between two ruined columns, brown robe, handmade cloth, eyes that did not belong to Varn. He raised one finger to his mouth, not command, warning. Then he turned and entered the dark.
I followed because fear was no longer enough to keep me useful. The alley ended in moss and rust. He touched a symbol, a double spiral. The wall opened like a secret that had been waiting for a body out of rhythm.
Below Varn, The air changed. Oil. Iron. Sweat. Old herbs. No artificial light. No civic hymn. No correction. Only bodies sitting in stone. Eyes open too wide. As if sleep had become the first enemy.
You took too long to return.
Return
From where?
from before the lie.
That was when the ruin became a mouth, not to speak, to remember. The city called it decay. The stone called it memory.
We are not a cult. Then what are you?
Living memory. They sat below the city without machines. No temples of glass. No civic screens. No polished laws on white walls. Only stone. Only scars. Only eyes that had refused to close.
Their bodies carried marks, lines, cuts, spirals, old burns, turned into language, not worship, counter-engineering.
The watched mind consumes false symbols. We burn them one by one.
No thought rebellion would be louder. Banners, weapons, fire.
But the red line did not begin with war. It began with refusing the dream they projected.
Insurrection is their word.
Lirah stood at the center, not crowned, not holy, not gentle enough to be harmless. She touched my chest, and the mark answered, one pulse, then another. The whole room held its breath. She said that the key is idea, more than idea, alive in you, but not yours alone. It wakes where truth, pain, and courage meet in the same body.
And what does it demand?
That you abandon everything you believe you are.
Above us, the city felt the signal. A metal crack crossed the stone. The alignment frequency returned like a blade, not searching for everyone, searching for me.
I wanted to ask if I was ready, but the question was already fear.
Then run awake and do not dream what they want.
That was the first lesson of the red line. Resistance is not rage. Resistance is memory that refuses to become useful. We were not rebels. We were what the system failed to erase.
They searched for the key in temples. They guarded vaults. They erased maps. They burned books that did not obey the alphabet. But the key was never a thing. I found the sentence inside a dying machine. The key is not an object. It is alive. Not alive like a body. Alive like a question that survives. Every answer made to bury it. Alive like blood. Remembering before the mind is allowed to speak. Alive like pain that refuses to become doctrine. Not object. Not weapon. Not symbol alone. When the mark opened on my chest, it did not feel like power. Power is clean in the stories told by those who want to be followed. This was heat. Nausea, pressure, a truth too large for the body that carried it. Some collapsed, some bled, some touched the edge and came back, less able to pretend. Lirah said, the key leaves a trace when it begins to vibrate. I asked if it was dangerous. She did not lie. Yes. Because truth is not soft to what was built to contain falsehood. Because memory is not gentle to the structure that depends on forgetting. Because the body must pay for every layer it removes. The Etéreos felt it as a scream, not because I shouted, because something inside the world had stopped agreeing to be silent. The key did not make me chosen. That was another trap. It made me responsible. It said, carry, but do not possess. Open, but do not command. Remember, but do not build a new cage from the shape of old freedom. The key wakes where truth, pain, and courage touch. The key did not open the world. It opened what the world had closed inside me. Cruelest menaces are not always the painful ones. Sometimes they are warm. I woke screaming with a voice, younger than my body, white ceiling, no corners, light without source. A sound too low for the ear, but sharp enough to hurt the bone. Instance 034, basic doctrine preparation. The words entered me like something already known, not remembered, installed. I tried to move. Nothing answered. The body was mine. Only in theory beside me, a figure almost human. Move thin metal arms in pain, climb the spine with a meaning attached to it. That was the genius of the wound. It did not only hurt, it explained itself as destiny. When I returned to the cave, Lirah did not touch me. She watched the breath, the neck, the signal, then asked, "What do you remember?" I said, "It was not mine. A child was being prepared, but it felt like me." She said, "They do not only erase, what is yours. They insert what never was. That is where the real terror begins. Not with emptiness, with a mother's voice that may have been written with bread smoke, with a wall prayer, with a room that feels like home, because someone taught your nerves to kneel there. They code with scent, temperature, song, texture, guilt. They make the false past hold your hand. Then when you try to pull it out, it feels like tearing yourself apart. I was not afraid of losing my past. I was afraid someone else had written it with tenderness. The first doctrine said, blood comes before word. The system inverted it. It made word govern blood. It made command feel like nature. It made nature feel like love. The NARA came through the field. She offered to remove the excess. She offered to return the calm. She offered to give back what hurt. And I understood the false memory does not always chain you with fear. Sometimes it chains you with relief. I do not want to function. I want to remember.
The name is not said. It is felt.
And why does it hurt?
Because it was buried before language. The book responded to my hand, not with ink, not with light, with cuts under the surface of the page. Letters like scars, remembering the body that made them.
The words came without sound. The language was divided. The vibration was confused, but the name remains whole. Then another sentence. You carried it before. You will carry it again.
My head split with pressure. The chest mark burned without flame, not brightness, not spectacle, a low living heat. Too deep to become light.
They know you are hearing. The code reverberates outside their spectrum. When it touches the threshold, the Etéreos feel a fissure in the veil.
She gave me a stone disc. Touch, she said, but be ready.
I touched it. The vision cut me. An Etéreo wrapped in broken gold, hands of cracked light, body folding under the sound of what it had rejected.
They cannot bear the name. The name makes them remember where they came from. The total coherence they chose to betray.
I screamed. The disc fell. Copper wires sang all at once.
She said it was only a reverse fragment. Only as if a word could be a blade. As if truth could enter from the wrong direction and still be truth.
The old walls were covered with marks. Each mark a name. Someone who tried to remember. Some vanished, some broke, some still walk, but not as they were.
I asked why I did not break. She said, because you are not only hearing, you are being called back.
The first language was not spoken. It was survived.
One veil would have failed, so they built 3. Not 3 places, not only geography. 3 densities of the same lie. 3 ways to keep a mind inside a shape it did not choose. Holds. The charm. There. Control does not shout. The air sweetens obedience. The wall does not look like wall because it touches you every morning like comfort. In Valaeth, the body becomes ashamed of disagreement. The cage learns to feel.
places where the lie has become tired. There, the disguises fail. For fractions of a second, monitors hesitate. Voices miss their mouths. The architecture shows its seams. Many call it freedom, but it is not freedom. It is only the place where the lie can no longer afford to look beautiful. I cross them from inside. The charm, the friction, the exhaustion. Each one offered a different anesthetic. When comfort failed, correction came. When correction failed, fear of collapse remained. Then I understood. Aedra is not the broken city. It is the same prism, vibrating in 3 densities, and each density creates a different kind of sleep. The prison was not one wall. It was 3 kinds of sleep. The first wall was not stone. There was no gate, no guard, no visible line, only open ground, and a thought that said, stop. I reached forward, and the arm trembled, not from weakness, from instruction. The fear without a story moved through the body. A word disappeared before I could speak it. Limit. Gone. Then I saw it. A shimmer in the air, like heat above stone. A membrane, not built to stop the body, built to keep the mind from believing. There was something to cross. That was its cruelty. It did not block the path. It made the self doubt the path existed. Every step pressed pain into the back of the skull, not muscle. Command. A hidden sentence. Repeating. This fear is yours. This hesitation is yours. This boundary is yours. So I answered with what remained,
This fear is not mine. This interruption is not mine. This limit was placed. Something under the skin, destabilized. Not magic, not miracle. A program losing balance because the body stopped calling itself. I stepped through, blood touched my lip. The world slowed on the other side. People sat in silence with eyes open and no light behind them. Not dead, suspended. I touched one shoulder and saw children in white rooms, hymns repeated until pain became protection, symbols pressed into skin, obedience installed so deeply that remembering became unbearable. That was when I knew they do not forget because they choose to. They forget because remembering hurts, and the system learned to use pain as a fence. No wall falls because someone strikes it from outside. A wall like that falls when truth vibrates louder than the command. First comes discomfort, then suspicion. Only much later, memory dares to call itself by its own name. The wall was not in front of me. It was the thought that told me to stop.
The path was made of glass, but it reflected things I had not lived. Choices never taken, deaths never suffered, faces I almost became. Every step rang through the teeth, as if I was walking on my own thought. Then I saw him, my own body, coming toward me. Same face, same voice, same clothes. But the smile was trained, empty, like Lirah. You took too long, I said. You are not me. I am what you left behind. The fear, the silence, the part that wanted to be rewarded for obedience. The ground broke. I fell through images with no stable owner. A mother without features, a room without windows, a chair in the center. My own body bound to it. Mouth sealed, eyes open, a voice repeating, "You were conditioned. You were designed! You cannot escape yourself!" I ran. Under the black surface,
I saw myself pointing children toward monitors. I saw myself kneeling before the inverted key. I saw myself laughing where I should have wept. They are possibilities. All of them live in you. Identity is an agreement with what you choose to forget. That was almost enough to break me, because guilt does not need proof when the body has been trained to confess. But beneath the glass, deeper than the accusations, there was one symbol, not inverted, not falsified, still burning, clean. Do not touch it. I can. It will destroy you. Then let everything false break first. I reached down the path shattered, not outward, inward. The false selves lost their surface. The reflection did not follow. When I stood again, the sky was blue. For the first time without returning my face. And I understood. I am not what they made of me. I am what survived it.
They did not destroy Ul-Nahar because it was weak. Then why? Because it was close.
The ruins rose from the gray horizon, as if the fire had ended yesterday. But nothing there had burned for centuries. Columns broken, stones blackened, symbols cut, not by tools but by vibration. The air did not weigh on the lungs. It weighed on consciousness.
Ul-Nahar was not a temple, not a kingdom, not a legend made soft by distance. It was a people who came close to crossing the veil, not with weapons, with kohens.
They breathed together, not to worship, to reconnect. I touched the stone and saw them, bodies in circles. No crown, no altar of domination. No machine, dressed as sacred. Only a white sound held by many chests. A community trying to remember the frequency before fear.
Then the Etéreos came, not as monsters, as wrong frequencies. They bent trust, they loosened faces, they placed doubt inside the bond before touching the body. One of them hesitated, that was enough. The fracture entered, the rest became fire.
I heard the old command, under the ash, keep them below the critical frequency. Do not let them vibrate in union. If humanoids awaken, the key will return.
They knew the key.
Yes, they felt it, then chose to dominate it. Codify it, use it, turn reconnection into obedience. That was when I understood the enemy's fear. They do not fear our strength, they fear what they abandon. If the key returns whole, everything built on distortion must dissolve, including them.
Ul-Nahar was not a ruin. It was evidence.
They burned the city.
Because the people almost illumined without asking permission.
You also carry the rupture.
Who are you?
Wrong question.
I felt her.
Before I saw her.
Not sound.
Not thought.
Not emotion.
A presence.
Moving between them.
A sense Aedra had taught us to call intuition.
So we would never study it.
She sat on stone, eyes closed, drawing lines with her fingertips.
The marks were not scratches.
They were records left in the surface, vibrating, before they became visible. Her skin carried irregular zones of light.
Her forehead, a spiral scar.
I knew the drawings before I understood them.
A single bearer is easy to hear.
He shines. He trembles. He betrays himself.
And
Two together.
bend the trace. The frequency folds, the edges blur, the watchers lose the path.
Ayen was not the key, not source. Echo, but an echo. So precise. It changed the space around the sound. When our hands touched, There was no warmth, there was displacement.
Lirah.
Nah,
El.
not spoken. Remembered, between bodies the room shifted with each thought. Images passed through me that were not mine, but the body received them as kin.
The key is not singular.
It is a field. It reaches full force only when consciousness stops pretending it is alone.
That undid the heroic lie.
I was not chosen above others.
I was one place where the signal became audible.
After she left, she did not disappear.
Symbols appeared on stones.
No one touched. Children drew spirals in dust.
Forgotten people woke with strange words on their lips.
The world began small disobediences.
It is not unifying.
It is spreading.
The key was never mine.
I was only where it became audible.
Silence is not absence of sound. It is absence of reaction. The Etéreos do not need doors. They follow sparks, fear, guilt, desire, memory, affection, loss, ambition. Light any two and they find you. They offer, you answer. That is the opening. Not feeling, answering what is not yours. The training was not combat, no blades, no running, no victory pose, only a stone, a body, a field, filled with voices that knew exactly where to press. A father's tone, a lover's absence, a child's fear, an old instructor, using my own cadence, each one, a hook, each hook, asking, will you become what I touch? At first, I failed. A phrase tightened the jaw. A memory lifted the pulse. A false mercy made the chest open. Every reaction was a light in the dark. Then I learned the first membrane, feel without contour, let the image pass without giving it a room. Let thought arise without crystallizing into command. Do not fight. Fighting still gives shape. Do not worship calm. Worship is another hook. In the final dream, an Etéreo wore my childhood. Then guilt, then fear, then the face of someone I wanted to save. It said, accept. And all this ends. I remained silent. It became more human. I remained silent. It thawed. I remained silent. Then it broke, not because silence attacked it, because there was nowhere inside me for it to hold. The silence was not empty, because the place where they could not hold.
The first crack came from inside the mountain. Not impact, not weather. Pressure. Looking for permission to become visible. Our rune was supposed to be stable. No active distortion, no living rupture, no known crossing. That was the lie of every map. The stones were intact. And wrong, the wind entered fissures and did not return. Footsteps came back, late. As if the ground needed time to decide whether we had arrived. Then the rock opened inside the crack. Light was not absent. It was devoured. Something moved there, almost liquid, almost breath. A depth that made depth itself look false. I touched it, the pull hit the mind first. Not pain, reversal. Something wanted to reduce the awakening to an error, to fold me back into the shape I had escaped.
They are not sealing. They are compressing passage.
Then it emerged. Not a body, a density, forced to exist. An arm formed and failed. A face attempted itself and broke. But the eyes arrived complete, too real, too old. It said without mouth, "You pass the point, we will break you from inside." The attack did not seek the flesh, it sought authorization. It wanted the field to agree that I had never changed. It dressed false memories with the texture of real ones. It gave lies the weight of childhood. Do not look at the face. Recognition is the anchor. I closed my eyes and searched not for the word, but for the place where word begins. Ul-Nahar. The creature trembled. Its shape lost the lies that held it together. But before it vanished, it struck Darum, no wound, no blood, no visible death. Only the field, cut from the body, still breathing, no longer there. That was when victory became too small a word. They were no longer attacking presence. They were attacking continuity. The world was not breaking. It was refusing to hide the wound.
Not every word transmits idea. Some transmit pain. Then why speak them? Because some lies leave only through rupture. The stone did not speak, it made me speak. Symbols spiraled inward, small inside large, patterns hiding inside patterns, as if meaning had learned to protect itself from careless mouths. I touched the lines, the skin warmed, the rock knew my frequency before I knew the sound.
Calm words are filters. These are older syllables, not built by them. Sounds that escape the symmetry of the field.
I repeated one, a small word, almost nothing. Pain struck behind the eyes. The air shifted, the stone cracked.
This is not sound, I said.
It is vibration with intention.
And if I am wrong?
You wound your soul.
Days later, a stronger syllable left my chest. A rubra fell. No blood outside. Inside, something tore.
She saw her father, but not her father. His face, worn by one of them. That is what the right word does. It pulls the wire where the false love was tied.
That night,
incantation was almost perfect, almost.
I answered.
Therenic.
The illusion split. The borrowed face melted a scream with no throat. Moved through the trail.
I learned then a word can be mercy and harm in the same breath. It can free the body and punish the wound that made the body survive. So not every word that hurts must be used. Power is not speaking. Power is carrying the rod and choosing the moment.
7 fragments. 1 sentence. 1 field. Without opposition.
Some words do not explain truth. They make the lie unable to stay.
Frequencies mix with things, not ours. A human shape, almost skin thin, eyes old, no hunger in them, only fatigue, the kind that comes when a being has fled so long it forgets what rest would mean. The Rubros raised blades. He did not flinch. That frightened me more, he said. I was one of them. Not now. Not truly yours. Not truly theirs. Something cracked. And when it cracked, I saw enough. What freed you? A child, not special, no key, no resistance song. The child looked at me and did not react. It did not save me. It exposed me. He told us about an altar alive, not stone, a being fed from birth on obedience, made into focus, a body forced to hold the field for others. Why
certainty. I had none, only resonance. Traded on into elf, I wanted to end the cycle, the fair, the simulation, ours and yours. If you lie, you will not survive. I already do not survive. I only resist. That was when I misfed. Another cruelty of the veil. It nature still. Truth must come from pure hands, but sometimes truth survives inside what harmed it. Sometimes a trivia carries evidence he can never own. Sometimes the broken enemy is not redeemed, only useful to the truth. He failed to kill. I did not trust him. I listened. And sometimes that is the beginning of harder wisdom.
The valley was beautiful. That was the first warning. The dust rose to the same height. The sound of each step returned. After the same delay, the light changed. Just enough to feel alive, but never enough to become uncertain. A perfect calm, the kind made by something that has removed all resistance. Solon walked ahead, too sensitive to remain asleep, not awake enough to survive the crossing. He wanted to help. That was his danger. He wanted proof that what he felt was real. I knew that hunger, it had almost destroyed me too. He heard something, a word or half of one, not from outside, from the place between hearing and remembering.
Then he stopped. No scream, no collapse, no wound, only cessation. I held his shoulders. Look at me. Nothing. The body breathed. The pulse remained. But presence had stepped back beyond the reach of hands.
Cut before vibration.
They were fast. They did not kill him. They interrupted the passage before birth. They closed the gate at the exact moment water began to find its course. I tried everything. Fragments of the key, breath patterns, touch, tone, silence, calling without force, nothing. The house remained. The address inside was gone. He was not dead, but he was not here. That sentence changed the war, because emptiness is not only loss, emptiness can be prepared. If the true vibration is cut early enough, something false can learn the shape of the vacancy. Placed him in protected sleep, not burial, not hope as certainty, hope as discipline, a circle to keep strangers from occupying the space where he might return. The system does not only hunt the awakened, it hunts the almost, the liminal, the nearly coherent, the ones who begin to remember before they can hold the memory. That valley taught me never again to confuse wrong softness with peace. The brutal attack creates resistance. The clean cut creates acceptance. He was not dead. He was the shade of someone almost legs.
Seven stones, weighted in a circle. Not machines. Witnesses. Each one tuned to a frequency older than instruction. The chamber held failed attempts. Inside its walls, people had come before. They lacked what cannot be built. A living pulse. The mark in my chest did not burn. It called.
Are you certain?
No. But if it vibrates in me, it cannot stay in me.
If I was reached, others can be reached.
Transmission was not a switch, not a ritual for spectacle, not a signal tower throwing command over a sleeping world. It was opening a passage through the body and not claiming ownership of what crossed. I sat at the center. First came the gray block, then iron in the mouth and the code where my name had been. Then came the effort to defend myself from remembering. And below that, the line that had been alive before defense. That was where the sound had to begin. Oh. Nah. You're The stones vibrated together. The field did not explode in light. It exploded in absence. A silence moved outward like cloth tearing from inside. I saw sleepers in rooms without windows, children staring at points that did not exist. Bodies sitting upright, waiting for a name they did not know they had lost. The call spread through hidden seams, not in lines, but through wounds. Then it stopped. The chamber thickened. The stones darkened, the signal folded back toward me, intercepted, but not cut.
Etéreo.
No. They cut. This answered. Something came back. Rough, unstable, alive. Not from Aedra. Not from any map. A certainty placed inside the chest. You are not the only one. The wave broke from excess, not failure. Too much recognition for one body to hold. I sent a signal to the sleeping. Something beyond Aedra answered. I woke with iron in my mouth and tears. I did not remember crying.
The body remained still. The mind had crossed.
I saw a blue desert. Sand like crushed crystal. A liquid sky.
Breathing slowly.
Figures in dark clothing. Walked around,
A half-buried stone, not praying.
Listening. One touched it.
Light spread under the sand like roots. Then every face asked it at once.
We heard it too.
Then came pillars, black as old sound, beings of translucent skin, sowed the air with their hands, not building cities, maintaining passage.
Then a white plain, no horizon, glass bone structures crossing the silence, dark blue skin, open chests, marks glowing on the sternum.
No mouth moved, but one question passed through all of them. Are we still alone?
The mark in my chest answered before I could, not yes, not no, recognition.
The seed was thrown in many soils. Now it grows, and the ground weeps.
That was when I understood Aedra
was not the center.
Aedra
was the first wound, loud enough to be heard. The Etéreos watched us closely, not because we were unique, but because we transmitted.
A truth buried in separate worlds recognized itself before it recognized the others. No network, no empire, no command, only resonance.
If I live, they will also be heard.
Does that frighten you?
What frightens me is when no one answers. The truth was not local. The lie was. The stone had not fallen, but I was already running.
Only after I moved did the mountain break. Dust rose. Bodies froze. They stared. Not at the danger, but at the timing. How did you know? I did not know. I felt. Not prophecy, not vision, not power. A slight leaning inside the field, as if reality made its first decision before matter received the news. The body heard what the eyes had not yet been given. It happened again. A passage before collapse. A pause before exposure. A turn before pursuit. Small things, too many. To call chance, too costly. To call gift. I sat alone on black rock, still warm from the day. I listened for the first movement before event, before fear, before sound, before name, and then the thought arrived. Time does not create. What happens? It reveals it. The surface arrives late. The vibration comes first. The intention comes first. Truth does not wait for the clock. The older Rubra sat beside me. She said, "You no longer walk inside the world." I said, "I walk in what comes before it." She said, "Then be careful. Some who hear too early forget to return." That warning saved me from worshiping the instinct, because the field is not a throne. It does not make you greater. It makes you responsible for the step others cannot yet see. At a threefold path, no mark guided us, no ruin, no sign. Only one passage was not saturated with fear. Before the foot touched it, I pointed there. No one argued later. The other paths would have exposed us. The narrow path opened. Not because I commanded it, because I listened before the noise arrived. Was not animal. It was older than inside and outside. A memory from the field before the fissure. A way of hearing the next step before matter gathers courage to become ground. The next step.
happened. My body was only learning where to arrive. The ground had no texture. The stones held no echo, as if that part of the world had been polished until memory could not cling to it. At the center, a line stood in the air, vertical, thin, alive, not a tear, a point of symmetry. Two vibrations, almost identical, trying to occupy the same wound. I reached out, the surface moved like water. Then another hand came back, mine, not mine, older in the same place, tired in a way I had not earned yet. The same mark on the chest, but deeper, as if in that other curve of the real, the key had gone below the skin. Do not ask what I am, ask what you become. When you stop believing, there is only one path. I touched him. The cold entered. With a whole cycle inside it. Towers white with ash. Children marked with the key. Across their backs. Etéreos fleeing. Another Kael. Leading crowds with closed eyes. A sky cracked open. A river of light. Running backward. Thousands of voices. Nearly saying the syllables. I still could not hold. Then it ended. The line closed. The silence returned, as if nothing had happened. But my hand remembered what the world refused to show. Later, another blade formed, weaker, pulsing with a mark. I touched it and saw a younger version of myself in a green field, under stars, holding a stone with the key, before Aedra, before this body, before this version of the world. The key was not only crossing space,
It was crossing time. The Etéreos were not guarding a city. They were guarding a pattern. And I was not the beginning. I was one recurrence of a signal. I had failed to end. Every mirror is a debt. Every version is a cost. The hand was mine, but the memory belonged to more than one life!
Here, they buried those who tried to plant the truth.
Planting.
Yes. Because truth does not always arrive as fire.
Sometimes.
It waits.
Underground. The fissure opened behind petrified roots. No warning. No alarm. Only a breath inside the wall. Ancient enough to feel. Less discovered than remembered. The mark in my chest did not warn me. It guided. Each pulse said, this place was never lost, only covered.
We descended in a spiral, basalt dark became amber stone, mineral. Organic, almost warm. The air grew dense, not with danger, but with presence, as if every step asked the body to listen deeper before being allowed to understand.
They were called failures, heretics, contaminants, seeds of dissonance.
But the chamber below was not a tomb. It was a field waiting without light, names scratched into the stone, had no dates, only marks. Each one, someone carried truth too early for the world around them.
I asked, did they die here? She said some died, sacrifices refuse to be consumed. Some become pressure under history.
Some wait until another body arrives with enough rupture to let them rise.
Do not romanticize it. Seeds are buried. Burial is dark.
Unhilt and place my hand on the amber floor. No vision came first, only grief, then voices not calling for revenge, calling for continuation.
Do not become crown. Do not become temple. Do not become the new command. Those who sowed did not ask to be remembered as martyrs. They asked that the truth keep growing without becoming another cage.
The first one broke without being touched. No blade, no wound, no visible hand. Only a voice that opened wrong inside his mouth. He had been stable until the step between two stones. Then the field entered his throat and returned, wearing someone else. He said his own name as if it belonged to another body. Not attack, not possession, not death, interference. The woman touched his face, then his chest. Then she stopped. Her silence was the diagnosis. They were not breaking bones. They were breaking continuity. They were cutting the line between breath and self.
A voice can survive. A voice can be stolen. A voice can return wrong.
Kael listened and understood the new war. The Etéreos no longer needed to enter the body. They only had to make the body doubt who was speaking through it. The first broken voice was not a warning. It was a map of where they would enter next. Kael woke with a thought. Already finished. You betrayed the truth before. It was too clean, too intimate, too ready. No memory begins with that much certainty. The war had changed. No footsteps, no visible enemy, no sky opening, only sentences appearing inside the mind with the temperature of confession. You failed them. You wanted this. You are always theirs. No! Guilt is not always truth. Sometimes guilt is a corridor built for an enemy. I know what is mine. I know what was placed. I know what burns false. Varn began to tear records. Others heard mothers. Some saw faces wearing old love like stolen cloth. The invisible war had no battlefield because the battlefield was recognition. Kael closed his eyes and did not chase the thought. He let it stand. He let it fail. The only weapon that could not be stolen was fidelity to what's never taught.
The field began to air before the stones moved. Dust waited too long above the ground. Footsteps returned from angles that had no walls.
The cell thought it had found refuge, a ring of rock, a clean absence, a place too quiet to be innocent.
Too clean.
Kael stopped before entering. The mark in his chest counted the emptiness, not presence. Absence, too much absence.
They had passed there, or left it, or shaped it as bait.
The cells scattered because survival could no longer look like staying together.
Break the pattern. Lose the mind. Change before they measure.
One went east. One went under. One carried silence.
like a sealed flame.
Kael watched them vanish and did not call it loss.
What breaks to continue does not die.
It changes shape before the system can name the
The first light did not come from the sky, it came from his hands. Thin lines under the skin, heat without flame. A map where no map had been written. After the cell dissolved, the trail became listening. No marks, no leader, no route. Only the body leaning toward what the mind could not yet accept. The light did not answer. It reversed. It showed him not where to go, but what in him had stopped begging for return. Not rescue, not reward, not proof, orientation.
He sat on stone with absence beside him, not as as space, not as punishment, as a room for what could finally answer.
The reverse of light did not heal him. It taught the wound which way to face.
Was not silent. It was listening. The rock beneath him did not return heat. It returned vibration. 3 short pulses, 1 long pause. Again. At first, he heard
pattern, then intention, then answer.
Everything before had carried invasion. The system imposed form. NARA offered relief. The monitors occupied intervals. This did nothing. It waited.
Are you certain?
No.
But loneliness was no longer an honest map. Not command, not worship, not rescue. Response. A black stone rose where no stone had been. Gold lines moved like veins inside night. And Kael knew, without knowing who called.
Who hears the echo before the sound? No longer belongs to one world.
The first to notice were not the awakened. They were the almost. The ones who never crossed the veil, but still felt when a face was too correct. A pause too even, a voice too ready. A smile with no fatigue, a human shape without human delay. The monitors did not command. That would have been simple. They occupied the interval between desire and remembrance. You chose this. You wanted this. You were already turning. No! A thought that arrives without cost is not always yours. They do not order. They tune. They do not strike.
until it sounds like obedience. The most dangerous command is the one that reaches you as your own idea. The most dangerous command is the one that reaches you as your own idea.
The vow did not tear like cloth. It tore like recognition.
People stood beside each other and stopped belonging to the same world.
A mother called from nowhere.
A lover answered from a frequency already gone.
Hands touched, but warmth could not cross.
The awakened had learned to resist invasion. They had not learned how to survive.
Truth separating them from those they loved. Are you here? I am here. Then why can I not reach you? Because presence is not the same
as remaining.
Because distance can happen inside the same room.
Not enemy, not betrayal, not death, difference.
The torn veil revealed no monster. It revealed what had never truly been joined. Been joined. it began. A syllable, a fracture, a sound that should not have survived language. First in dreams, then in dust, then on lips that did not know what they were carrying. The system called it contamination. The awakened called it memory. Kael called it what it was, a name refusing grammar. Not spoken, not owned, not contained. Every time someone tried to make it doctrine, it broke the sentence every time. Silence it, it entered the stone. Some truths do not arrive to be pronounced. They arrive to tear the language that imprisoned them.
The field went quiet. The dreams began to scream. Kael did not sleep. He was taken. No dark. No rest. Only cities he had never seen, speaking through him. A voice said, "You never woke." I wanted to answer, but the mouth was gone. The abyss did not lie.
Like NARA, it did not comfort. It wore intimacy with the weight of fact. His mother passed without turning. His name returned in the wrong mouth. Do not answer. Do not follow. Do not give the dream a room. The only passage was silence, not empty silence. Pure silence, the silence that does not react when called by a wound. When the abyss speaks with your memories, only pure silence crosses the night, unrewritten.
He appeared
without arriving. Almost body, almost signal, almost truth. A shape held together by effort. What came from him was not speech. It was resonance, turned backward, clean enough to deceive, wrong enough to hurt. The mark in Kael's chest answered with warning, not because the being was false, because it was mixed. I carry what they rejected. I remember what they inverted. Then, do not explain. Vibrate. The true does not need to conquer the ear. It separates what can flower from what can only imitate. Not force, not proof, not doctrine, resonance. The true does not impose itself, it vibrates, and every being reveals what it can still become.
Under Kaim, they found order, not ruin. Order. A circular chamber, beneath dead foundations, walls carved, not with words, but with roots for blood, obedience, guilt, and offering. The old world had not hidden sacrifice. It had engineered it.
Every spiral led inward, every channel asked the body to become fuel for something calling itself fire.
Do not look for cruelty, only in violence. Look for it in design.
The altar
was not a place where death happened. It was a machine that taught death to sound necessary.
From blood, order. From sacrifice, harmony. From silence, salvation.
Kael touched the stone and felt generations converted into function, not remembered, consumed.
The oldest prison was not built from walls, it was built from the belief that pain becomes sacred when measured correctly. The mirror did not show him. It waited until he remembered. The reflection is a form of debt. Then another Kael opened his eyes. Not false, not true. A life bent by another choice.
Do not ask which one is real. Ask what each one paid.
One carried command. One carried loss. One carried the key like a wound that had become language. Their hands touched the surface. From opposite sides, cold entered. So did memory.
Every mirror is a cost. Every version is a wound. Every path leaves an echo.
The Etéreos were not guarding only Aedra. They were guarding recurrence, patterns, cycles, the return of what they failed to end.
The mirror did not multiply him. It proved he had never been.
Only one attempt. Kal-Durrah did not fall in a single fire. It burned through belief first. Streets emptied. Symbols cracked. Voices carried heat.
before flame arrived. The people did not know whether they were fleeing an enemy or a truth too hot to inhabit.
Kill soldiers lighting themselves with the last memory of obedience. He saw hands trying to save the old signs from a world that no longer fed them.
Let what is false burn without hatred.
But people are incited.
Then carry them, not the cage.
Save the living, do not save the live.
Fire moved like judgment, only to those who needed judgment to understand change. To Kael, it was weather, painful, exact, unknown. Kal-Durrah burned because some structures would rather become ash than release the bodies inside them.
At first, Kael thought he carried too much because he carried alone. Then others began to answer, not followers, bearers.
One in the north
Heard the syllable before sleep.
One in ash
Held the mark without knowing its name.
One child drew
A spiral with both hands shaking.
The key was not dividing, it was distributing.
Not choosing kings, not making saints, finding bodies where truth, pain, and courage could touch without becoming command.
Daring, do not possess, open, do not rule. Remember, do not crown the wound.
Kael felt relief and fear together. If many carried it, no one could own it. If no one owned it, no empire could be built from its light. The bearers were not an army. They would prove
that the truth had refused to become a throne.
The field became a room of strings, not visible, felt. One tremor in one body changed the pressure in another. One name remembered in silence, loosened a knot far away.
That connection was not nearness, it was accuracy.
Some chords could not cross, some crossed and cut. Some carried grief like music before speech. Do not pull what is not ready.
How do we have?
By holding tone.
Hold tone.
Do not drag.
Hold true.
Do not claim. A string touched too hard becomes violence. A string left alone forever becomes loss. The art was neither rescue nor abandonment. It was resonance without ownership.
The crossing of strings that love without control still has a way.
There were places where the world began to answer differently. Not safer, not easier, more honest. Stones move bodies stopped lying to themselves. Paths appeared only where fear lost authority. Water gathered around a silence that did not beg. The territory was not conquered, it resonated. No banner, no law, no throne, only agreement between presence and ground. No map before truth, no road before tone, no shelter before presence. Kael understood why Varn had needed walls. A world that listens cannot be ruled by architecture alone. A field that responds cannot be owned by anyone who cannot stand being changed. Resonant territory is not land. It is the place where the ground no longer helps you lie. The fissure was smaller than fear expected. No sky split, no mountain fell, only a line where the world stopped pretending. Both sides were the same. Some called it wound, some called it door, some called it disaster. Kael called it accuracy. The system tried to seal it with geometry. Etéreos arrived with corrected frequencies, old signs, bright containment, certain hands. Nothing held a line. Contain. Restore.
No, you cannot stitch together what only stay on under compression. Not rupture, revelation, not damage, separation.
The fissure did not hate either side, it only refused to keep lying for both. The world was not splitting. It was becoming honest enough to have edges.
final harvest was not grain. It was attention. It was obedience. It was grief. It was every life trained to offer itself before asking who was fed. The Etéreos had always harvested what bodies called sacred. Fear refined, guilt stored, love redirected, sacrifice named harmony. Now the field began to refuse yield. A prayer broke before becoming fuel. A child cried, and no altar answered. A bearer stood still, and the old hunger passed through him without finding a hook. No more offering, no more hidden mouth, no more holy consumption. The harvest failed, not because the hungry were defeated. It failed because the living stopped translating pain into tribute. The final harvest ended when suffering no longer agreed to call itself food.
The knot stopped belonging to one mouth. It passed through sleep, through stone, through children who had never heard the old language.
Hell.
NARA.
In Eric, a child woke singing without melody. In Zar, a woman spoke, and every wall forgot its command.
Kael did not search for the name. He saw it arrive everywhere. That silence had become ready.
Not mine, not yours, not one, not throne.
The Etéreos receded from places where the name was not pronounced, but inhabited. A truth spread without becoming empire.
A sound moved without becoming order.
The name in all was not a chorus. It was the end of needing permission to be real. It began as rest. That was why it frightened them late. A softness entered the field, then the chords went mute. No attack, no scream, no rupture. Only the medium removed, the place between voice and reception went dry.
The Etéreos could not stop the name, so they obstructed the air through which recognition traveled.
Kael?
I hear the absence.
Silence can shelter.
Silence can sever.
Silence can starve.
30 days passed before the field answered again, not as victory, as evidence. The true signal had not died. It had been waiting beneath the obstruction, unbound, unreduced, unchanged. When the frequencies returned, they did not sound louder, they sounded less afraid.
Kael did not fall. He stopped. Between zones, between names, between the field and the body that had carried too much. Inside, there was no symbol, no task, no enemy, only space without narrative, not nothing. Presence.
For 3 nights, his body remained with the world. Others feared departure. Lirah watched without pulling him back. She knew the deepest return cannot be forced by love.
Come back, only if you return as yourself.
What self?
The answer had no sentence. It was older than Kael, older than wound, older than mission. returned to Kael, when Kael no longer needed to be the center of what passed through him.
Crossing was not announced.
No voice called, no leader raised a hand. No gate opened with ceremony. It simply began.
In distant zones, bodies rose alone. In pairs, in small groups, not knowing where, knowing only that staying had become heavier than movement.
Kael was not first. That mattered. He did not guide. He did not command. The field, organized by affinity, not obedience. No map, no crown. No order, only tone. Old houses collapsed quietly, not from anger, from obsolescence. Symbols dimmed because no one could feed them without lying.
It stopped answering.
No, you stopped vibrating with it.
The crossing was not escape. It was the body finally agreeing with the truth it had carried too
The trail disappeared without ending.
The stones remain.
The fog remained.
The body remained.
But direction.
Lost authority.
At the threshold, truth did not reward.
It revealed.
One carried guilt.
One carried obedience.
One carried an old wound, dressed as loyalty. None were push. The field only showed what each had brought.
Some crossed, some brought.
watched and did not confuse mercy with making everyone continue.
No force,
No rescue,
no conquest, only crossing.
what waits there?
Nothing that flatters us.
Only what remains when defense has no work left.
The threshold was not a door.
It was the end of needing a door to become true.
Not everyone crossed, and no one was abandoned. Some stayed, because the old rhythm still held them without tearing the skin. They rebuilt small temples. They sang forgotten hymns. They touched symbols with tears that were not false. The field answered as much as they could bear. Kael looked back without contempt. For the first time he understood. Not remaining could also be choice. Not every limit is cowardice. Not every refusal Some stay, some cross. Truth does not weaken, because it is not forced. The old zones were no longer pure lie. They were habit, protection, repetition, a song somebody still needed in order not to break. Those who remained were not left behind. They were given the rhythm they could still call life.
among them without leading. He also did not follow in the old sense. His body still had weight, shadow, breathe, fatigue. But each step felt less like choice and more like agreement. Carney, air, and presence found consensus under his feet. Those who followed were not disciples. They were not proving faith. They were learning how to move without command, how to gather without hierarchy, how to remember without building a new cage around memory. No leader, no throne, no doctrine, only tone. The new field did not reward them. It simply remained available. And that was more difficult than promise. Those who followed did not become one body. They became many presents, able to stand without being owned.
The last key did not shine. No sky opened. No thunder spoke. No sign came down to prove the moment. There was only release. A pressure that had lived inside the world for ages stopped defending itself, not defeated, released.
Kael searched for the object one last time and found nothing outside the body, nothing in stone, nothing in temple, nothing in prophecy.
Then where is it?
Where war ends between thought, body, and presence.
Not object, not weapon.
Not crown, condition.
The last key was not the final tool. It was the end of needing tools to open what had never truly been locked. The last key turned when Kael stopped, looking for a door.
schism did not arrive as broken stone did arrive in the way the air stopped touching certain presences. Old walls lost meaning for those who had crossed. Old rituals still warmed those who remained. Neither side vanished. The mixture ended.
For 5 days, separation gained body. Not punishment, not victory, not abandonment, exactness.
Each step will be choice. Each choice a field.
Then even goodbye must not become command.
Not all distance is lost.
Not all staying is failure.
Not all crossing is conquest.
No door closed. There was only a point where the old could no longer cross whole into the new. The schism ceased to be a wound when it became the exact shape of a truth sustained.
After the schism, time did not end. It lost authority. There was still light, still dark, still rest, still waking. But nothing obeyed the old count. The field breathed by another measure, not clock, coherence. Names loosened, not erased, released from the labor of protecting presence. Kael remembered the cell, the code, the hunger, the woman who tore the impossible. Nothing vanished, but none of it held him hostage. Remember. Release. Remain. Old symbols failed gently, not because someone destroyed them, because they had no root left in the new field, in the place where there had been search. There was only presence and presence was enough to keep the world from lying again.
When the last noise settled, Aedra did not shine. No chorus, no promise written in the sky. Only quiet without ornament, so complete that many bodies did not know whether to call it peace.
Kael stayed beside the water. The mark no longer burned. It did not crown him. It did not separate him. It remained
As trace, proof of crossing, not title.
those who followed learned slowly. They did not build dogma from difference. They did not turn the crossing into merit.
There was work, care, memory, hesitation. There was also grief. All will cross.
And truth must not become violence because it can wait.
Remain open, do not rule. Remember without cage. The key had never been an object lost inside the world. It was a condition of being when thought, body, and presence stopped warring. And somewhere beyond the quiet, the veil began to tremble again.